Did you have any experiences, or what, if you pondered how you were doing with these small and simple things? What's your takeaway?
Well, it's kind of funny because we had our Come Follow Me discussion
Yes.
Sunday night, and I came away from it feeling kind of discouraged, like it was all over the place. And anyway, I was talking to my husband that night, and he was saying what a great, he thought it was a great experience. He's like, the kids were all engaged and they were asking questions, and so I was like, I need to, I guess, reevaluate how I'm looking at it, because he loved that the questions and the direction were coming from them, and to me it felt like, oh, it's so scattered. But
Okay, so now what made you feel like it was scattered?
I guess because it just kept going different directions. Like one kid would say something, so we'd talk about that for a brief little moment, and then somebody would say something else that seemed really unrelated to me. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I like things more cohesive than that.
Okay, yeah, that's good. You know, we, in the past, when we look at like lecture mentality or preparing a primary lesson, and here's my lesson and this is what I need to cover, and so these are the things you do, and now we're changing format a little bit to discussion and input and making it safe. I can see where it feels a little bit like a shotgun, you know, you're just getting scattered. But I think we have to change how we think about it, because sometimes they do get more, because if they have a question that pops up, that's ping pong mental thingy game that we play, and you wait until it fits in to the lesson format, they forgot it. So I'm with you. I'm an organized person, and you do this, you know, and so sometimes I feel like, and where did that come from? You know, did I miss am I not connecting dots here? Where did that come from? So I understand what you're saying, but it's interesting that he felt like. Now, did you have an opportunity to talk to the kids and see what they felt like it was?
No, I should. I didn't think about that.
You know, because it would be interesting to see if they felt it was more open and that they got more out of it and that they were more included and it was more theirs than yours. So just think about that. That's an interesting, thank you for sharing. Andrea.
Something else to think about too, though, is if you've been in the school classes and you've watched in their school classes recently, their classes are so different than how we used to be. It's here and there and this and that, and it's all over the place. And so for them, that is how they learn right now. And even with all of the commotion that's going on, like they can be listening to music and doing their homework and reading a book, like they can do all of those things at the same time. And that's what their brains are trained to do, is all these different things. And even though it's not the best way to do it, that still is how it is. And so that was probably part of what you were seeing too.
That's interesting. It's been a long time since I've been in the classroom. That's good. Yes.
I think I've served in the youth for a while, and that's how theirs was going too. It was more, and it seemed like those kids were getting more of like the why of what we were doing, you know, because they were asking all these different questions, you know, that didn't really, it was hard as a leader to learn it, because I was so used to the, I'm gonna teach all this, you know, and they didn't shout out questions as much, but then the way they changed the youth and how they
Right.
they did, and so I think the Come Follow Me is kind of designed the same way as that.
So if you've been with the youth for a while and watched this change, do you feel like our youth are changing? What do you see, how do you see it affecting the youth?
I think they're stronger. I mean, there's things that I watch them, and if I would have been going through those same things, I don't know if I would have been as strong. I don't know. I feel like they're stronger because it kind of is more upon them to learn and get their own testimony, you know. So.
Do you feel like they're binding together more, or are they just stronger individually? Maybe that's a hard question, and maybe every group's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I wonder if this, you know, because I'm not with the youth right now, if their safety in asking and then receiving input from a lot of, actually pulls them together, or if it's just strength individually, they're just maybe getting a little bit stronger.
Both. I mean, I am thinking of some of like the older ones that have already graduated and are getting married and stuff, and the younger ones, it seems like the new group is kind of getting closer together. So,
Interesting.
but I never really thought about it before until right now. But-
Well, I listened to the prophet talking about them needing to stand and be different and look different and act different and in happy ways, and I think they need the strength of doing that together. That is this unit, as this group, they look that way instead of this individual standing out all by themselves. And I'm hoping that this brings them together and unites them and helps them feel some solidarity together, but I don't know how that's
Yeah, I can
looking.
see them growing together more. Yeah, with the service and stuff, I think our girls seem to be pretty close right now.
good. See, that's encouraging. That's wonderful. Then you see, ooh, yes.
But they're not friends at school necessarily, but
Yeah.
when they come to church, they're one, it doesn't seem like there's as much of that.
Yeah.
heaviness with them.
Picking and backbiting a little. And hey, if that's where it starts, good, fabulous. I do think that a lot of times, and you working with youth would know better, but I do think that our youth have a dual personality, kind of a, what do they call it, a cyber, not a cyberspace personality, whatever.
Social media.
Yeah, they kind of have who they are at school is one thing, and then when they come to church, they put on their persona being very good and then when they are away, they kind of take on a dual nature, and the goal is to help them have integrity so they're the one person always, and that it's hopefully it's the stronger one that they will choose to then stand and be happy to be different in righteous ways. Yeah. Anyone else have a comment about the teaching, about the youth, about the simple things that we did? Did anybody take the opportunity to ponder for a moment or think about this attitude and action that we tend to teach by action or by command or by telling them what to do, but checking maybe our own heart and seeing where we are? Did anybody take a minute to kind of look at how those come together? Yes.
I always think, kind of with the come follow me and stuff, like, we do it. We are good in practicing, and then I always come away sometimes, like, I want my husband to take charge and for it to come from him and the leader, and that's great, and then I walk away going, well, that wasn't very uplifting, Not that it was negative, but I was just like, I want to come away on cloud 9. Like, that was so fulfilling in my children. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's really good to be in the practicing, but I also saw, well, what am I doing to make it being more than practice, to being like knowledge and action?
Uh-huh.
And so I really thought about that. I'm like, okay, am I taking those, and then with the homework I thought, am I taking that time to find those little teaching moments? I think that's where I can reach my children, into turning that into knowledge and to go to the next step rather than like, yeah, that's what we believe. Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Okay, those are good things. But then, like, I was trying to get dinner ready and things were kind of slow last night, and I said to my daughter, can you get something ready for family home evening? And in negativity I said, and not just grab the friend and read a story.
Oh.
And which we've done for years, and I quickly caught myself. I said, that is wonderful, but let's see if we can put a little more emphasis into something more. And so I was like, okay, I think I caught myself, but I knew what I did wrong. And so then when I was like, great. She goes, I'm ready. And so after dinner we sat down, okay, and then she pulled out her personal progress thing and did this beautiful thing. And I was like, oh, good, maybe, like, small and simple things. I'm like, maybe, she goes, I passed this off and I planned a family home, comes home today, I need to follow back up and tell her how much I appreciated that, because instead of going to bed last night being like, oh, where's the oomph coming from? It really was good. She totally did it. And she asked each one of us to read scriptures and what we thought, and we had a discussion, and it was not just grab the friend and read something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really need to do that when she comes home and just say, I appreciate that, and it was wonderful that you did that.
Could I make just a suggestion?
Yeah, how do I, instead of praising, how do I, because I want to encourage, not praise to where she feels like, just like, thank you.
Okay, so the thing about it is,
Yeah.
as I stand up here and listen to you,
I know, tell me.
you just did it.
Okay.
So it's not saying, how do I do this? You actually just did it. So what you told us is, she took out her personal progress, and she engaged everybody in questions, and she was asking all of us to get involved, and we set these goals. Those are the things you say. Now, what I would suggest, without knowing her personality, and this, but this is just the thought that's coming to me and I just share it, is that you write it.
Oh, okay.
Do it in a written letter.
Mhm.
Be not too long. Be very, 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 very specific. Because now what you're doing, you're validating what she did, which is wonderful. But you're teaching her the process to continue to do. And now it's in a written format so that she has access to go back and review it. So next time it's her turn to do home evening, you say, oh, we had such a great home evening that you did last time. If you could just kind of do that very same thing that you did, it was wonderful. Then she says, ooh, what did I do? If you've just told her and now it's forgotten, I mean, it's a good feeling that she has, but the specifics are kind of forgotten. Now it's in a written format that she can go back if she chooses and say, ooh, what did I do? What made that good? And she has access then to that continual teaching. And I would maybe just leave it in on her bed or leave it somewhere and then do that, but then besides, somewhere along in the evening, just give her a big hug and say, ooh, last night was so awesome. And then leave that and let the details be filled in the written format.
Okay, thank you.
That's just a thought. Anyone else have a experience or did anybody read Elder Durant's talk about the teaching in the home, a joyful, sacred responsibility, and pick up on what I wanted you to pick up on were his examples. Those little examples that he had. Did you pick up on those? About arm wrestling with his dad, and then his dad followed through with, just very short little counsel, teaching, taking those, creating. It's actually not taking, it's creating sacred teaching moments. And you have to always be in tune kind of with the Spirit to have those things come. Did you see those? And then did you experience any of those? Did you have one of those during the week where you could take what was going on and then connect it to teaching a quick, 3-sentence teaching moment? Did you find that you had any of those? This wasn't the week for it. Yes.
I've kind of been having those over time since we started Come Follow Me. My girls are 3 and a year and a half.
Perfect.
And how we're doing it is, we do our after church to follow up with them. But the next morning is when my husband and I read over the entire week and decide on a theme.
Okay, so you do this Sunday night with your husband or Monday morning?
Monday morning.
Monday morning, okay.
So we just read through that week's, those 3 pages. So we read through it and we decide on the themes that we can try to focus on that our little girls will understand. And so, I think it was the second week we decided on fear because Joseph felt fear. Mary felt fear at first when they were told that they were going to have a child. And so that's what we focused on with them. And for some reason, that was the week that both of my girls kept waking up with night terrors or something like that. And so we went in there and just termed like little teaching moments like that. And then I don't know if I missed a week, so I don't know if I was listening to yours or if I was listening to just a talk while I was doing the dishes, and my daughter heard them say faith, and she was like, "Mom, what's faith?" And I was like, and so then we just like took that little moment, and then later she like told my husband what I told her, and
It just gives me goosebumps.
So,
That's so
like,
awesome.
I wasn't here last week, and I don't remember who shared, but someone shared that like they felt the weight on their shoulders when they announced it, that this change was happening, and I felt that exact same thing. I got up and walked out of the room and just started crying. I was
Oh,
like, I already feel like so weighed down, but then I was talking to a friend the other day, and she was like, I'm just struggling, like I'm having a hard time. And I was like, I felt that exact same way, but as I prayed about it, and when my attitude, like I tried to have a positive attitude about it, and I just realized that it's not this huge weight where we have to sit down and have these massive lessons. It's that we have an open heart to teach in those tiny moments where they happen. Because her son and daughter are the same age as mine. And, I don't think that it was meant to be a weight. I think it was meant to it's more a part of everything. It just happens as we go. Not, here we go, you're 3 and you need to read the scriptures right now with me. So.
yeah. You are so right. It's creating the way. It's creating a lifestyle. It's creating the way you live your testimony all the time in the home. See, we're so used to this checklist mentality, thinking, okay, so come follow me then is doing another big thing. It's not. It is not. It's changing the heart of the way you do it all the time. You are right on. She's so blessed to be able to talk to you. That was wonderful. Wonderful. And if she has children the same age as your children, you'll be a peaceful example that you can do this correctly, righteously, with real intent. And it's a heart condition. It's not one more thing on a checklist condition.
Yeah, I feel like it's changed because that way the thought was it's just another thing to be done. But now that everything is aligned and we're like, this is what we're talking through the week. We're learning it at church. We're talking about it. It's already on our mind. It's already on our hearts. So it's way easier to talk about. I think it's easier, really, than the weight that I felt before.
Yeah.
Where I was coming up with something we had to talk about on Sunday and on Monday, and then my heart wasn't prepared.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you're getting the vision, because it's wonderful. That's great. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else yes, Andrea.
So one of the things that we were studying this week was the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the difference between them. And so something that kind of stood out to me when we were studying that was we were talking about how the Pharisees lived by really, really strict list of you have to do this and you have to do this. You can only take so many steps on the Sabbath and all of the very, very, very specific things. And they felt like if they checked every one of those things off their list, then they were righteous and religious and they were good. And so we were talking to our kids about how the things that we're teaching in our home, are we teaching them like that? Like, are our rules in our home, do they see them as that? Or are they seeing them as that this is why we're doing them? And these are things you can do to help you along the way. And so then when we, this morning we were talking about the Jesus Christ baptism. And so we talked about, we have a daughter who's 7 getting ready to get baptized next year. And we were talking to her about how, that this is what each of us have done, but that it's not a rule that she has to follow like she would a Pharisee. Like, that's something she can choose to do, and here's her things that she can do. And so we keep going back and forth between, is this a Pharisee thing? And so it's kind of making me have to change the way I look at things. Like, am I teaching them the why of it? Am I showing them the blessings, and this is why we want to do those things, so that we can have all of these blessings? So, but attaching it to a name, like the Pharisees or the Sadducees, attaching it to an actual name just helped, I guess, to be able to say, okay, are we being a Pharisee here? Like, how is this working?
That's awesome. You realize that in the Book of Mormon, when Lehi and his family left Jerusalem, Laman and Lemuel, part of their dilemma in following their father was that they felt like the Jews in Jerusalem were righteous and could not see why Lehi was prophesying about destruction and wickedness when they perceived in their hearts, they perceived that these Jews were righteous. And the reason that they thought they were righteous is because of these lists of laws or rules that to Laman and Lemuel it seemed like they were keeping, but totally devoid of the Spirit. And that's where Laman and Lemuel had a harder time. And so when you think about teaching your children in the home, when we teach it as the Pharisees, this list of rules, and now that may not be the way you think you're teaching, but if that's the way they perceive and they're receiving, then you can see why it causes rebellion. And you can see why instead of building faith, even though they may be complying with the rule, that instead of them internalizing it as faith building, they look at the church as just so heavy because it's just all these rules you have to follow. Our goal is to help them to develop faith and come into Christ. And where we need guidelines, we need to have the commandments. If we don't teach the why of the commandments, they just become a list of pharisaical kinds of rules that they will revolt against, that they will have a problem with. So it's just interesting in this Come Follow Me and this approach and how it goes, that we understand it and do it correctly. Anyone else? This is great sharing. You've had some good experiences this week. Makes me happy because then I know that you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it during the week in your busy, very busy lives. So anyone else want to share a little bit before we move on? Yes, please.
I just really appreciated in Elder Bednar's speech.
Did you read that?
Yeah.
Wasn't it
It's
awesome?
amazing.
I felt like he was teaching 20 years ago what you've been teaching us, but I really appreciate the formula that the Savior actually gave about going home and then pondering and then praying for answers, and I don't remember the last one, but I feel like that's really similar to the Ponder Pad idea about
Yeah.
writing things down, but then going home and thinking more about it and seeing it through.
Thank you. I'm so glad you read that. That was the most exciting part of my week, was to read that. Andrea's the one that brought it to all of our attentions. And it was just, to me, of course it always makes me feel good when I feel validated what I'm doing is right. It's so good for me. Anyone else like to share a little bit? Did anybody else read that talk? It's so good, so good. It's one of those ones that I have to put up with. President Benson's Pride one that I got to read over, regularly so I can get it. Yes.
And was this last week? What was the talk?
The link. It's not in the conference. It was in 1998 or something like that. It's an old one,
Okay.
but oh my word. And the link is on the web. Andrea's posted it on the web. And boy, if you didn't read it last week, do it this week. Do it. Teach to understanding or teach to.
Teach understanding?
I don't quote me on that. It is on the website. Andrea posted it on the website. Teach to understanding or something like that. But it's 1998, and it was a devotional at Rick's then, and it is really, really, really good, and just it's gloved, it's dovetailed into those things that we've been talking about the last 2 weeks, the small and simple things and taking time to teach. Thank you for bringing that up. I love that. So if you weren't here or you didn't get that, that is one I would highly recommend. Not only that you read, of course I'm old-fashioned, you aren't, but I like to touch and feel and have hard copies of things that I know where are. When they're lost on the internet, they are lost on the internet. So I like to have those because they come to my attention. I see them, and so then I read them more often. But that talk right there is one that I would put with Pride, President Benson's Pride talk. I think that's an amazing bit of counsel. Apostolic counsel. Okay, should we, anybody else like to give us a little tidbit, a little share before we go on? Okay, what we're going to talk about today is differences in all of us. In this last few weeks in teaching, and we've talked about taking time to teach and teaching to application, teaching past knowledge to understanding, to internalization, to application, teaching faith, teaching past knowledge, and teaching to the levels where it becomes internalized so that ourselves, you know, I loved what you shared about you learning about Come Follow Me to a point that it's coming happily from inside rather than just an exterior commandment. You know, we're learning how to do that in our own lives as well as trying to teach our children to learn that. So grateful you shared that we see this process on our level where we are, because this is an ongoing forever. This never changes as long as we're on the earth. We're going to have these kinds of experiences. Some to come readily, some come really readily, where we just hear it and we get it and it's wonderful, and others we may struggle a little bit more. But as the speed increases that we're going to see change, and we will see ourselves going through this process as well as teaching our children too. And what's important to understand is there's no one right, that we all learn a little bit differently, and we internalize at a different rate, and we internalize different things at different rates. One thing may come easily, one thing may be a little bit more of a struggle. And how aware we need to be of two things. One is how each of our children and ourselves, how we learn. How we learn. And then number two, to understand that learning takes place at different rates. Meaning, I can have a lesson on faith, and one of my children may just get it. And if I have 4 children, another one may not have any idea of what I'm talking about. What do you mean faith is a seed? That's something you plant. I don't get the connection. I can't connect it. And it may be that they're just too immature, meaning too young, or it may mean they haven't had enough experiences yet, or it may mean that it's going to be a concept a little bit harder for them to grasp over time. So we have to understand that just because we have fabulous lessons, we have these moments that are, well, they're not always very often, but we have those moments, that even in those moments, everybody in the room didn't get it. Everybody didn't have that moment just because we did. And just because they had that moment doesn't mean that it's internalized forever. Which says teaching never stops. For us, learning for us, or teaching our children never, ever, ever stops. It's always, always, always going to be there. Now, what happens is, I think as we have our children at home, we assume if we've taught something pretty well, that they've all gotten it. So we just assume, I've taught this and taught this and taught this and taught this, so you get it, so you got it, so let's go on. That's not necessarily the case. Particularly if you have some space between older children and younger children. We tend to be very focused in teaching our older children work responsibilities, how to clean a room, how to do the dishes, how to vacuum, how to take care of a dog, and then assume, because we still have the dog, because you're still supposed to be making your bed, that the younger ones are getting it. Only we've never spent the one-on-one time with exactness in teaching them. So, and it doesn't mean that you always have to, because sometimes an older child can help a younger child learn, and there just becomes the expectation in the home that this is what we do. But too often then, they're learning the rules without learning the testimony of the wise if you aren't continuing to help each one-on-one. Does that make sense? So part of learning how to deal with this and what to do with it is to stop and start looking at our children and our spouses and those we minister to, those we have stewardship over, as individuals. So if you're going to have a come follow me, a discussion on, let's do fear. Fear, that was good. How does that affect, how can I present that so a 3-year-old gets it, but how can I present it so a 13-year-old gets it who's fearful of school? And then how do I also present it so the 17-year-old, 18-year-old who's about ready to go on a mission gets it? And how do I, create examples and in this process of teaching? Now, it may not be in that moment, in your moment of family discussion, but as you said, it becomes then the topic you're thinking about all week. How then, during that week, do I individualize this to where each person, each child is in their place? How do I take it on myself? My fear may be raising my children in this wicked world. So how do I internalize the meaning of this? So you see where the topic may be the same, the subject may be the same, how you present it is different, and then how they receive is different. And so our responsibility then is to follow through to the end. We talked about the application all the way through, knowledge, internalization, following it through to the end. And what is our end? What's our end? When we follow our teaching through all the way to the end, and we know that they're all different, and we know that they're all experiencing different things and looking at life differently, what is our end? I hate it when somebody asks a question and they have an answer in mind, and you better give the right answer. Oh, yes.
Well, according to Elder Bednar's talk, it's the understanding. Once they understand it, that's when it's the end.
That is right. I would never disagree with him. I would say that's right no matter what he said. He'd say, that's right. But our part in it's a little different. Go, Julia.
I don't think it ends.
Okay, it doesn't end.
No.
It doesn't.
My adult children still understand and do this differently, so I don't
Yeah.
think we ever get out of it.
And you're exactly right. Our responsibilities were never released as parents, so we're never released. So it doesn't end, but how does it, where do we find some, I did that, or I still need to work on that kind of experience?
Is it when they start putting that into practice without you coaching it? Like they just start doing it and you're like, okay, they're getting it. I can back off just a little, but when you see them put it into practice and start doing it themselves is when you get the glimpse of, okay.
Yes. Yes. And they're all going to start doing it at different times and in different ways. And in order to figure out if you're even getting there, is the come follow me pattern of questions. So if you want to know where they are in this journey, ask them. Only they can tell you. Only they can tell you. But it has to be carefully thought out questions. And that's why I think the ability to ask good questions is a spiritual gift that we need to pray for. Because it either opens the door where they feel comfortable and really can share and say, Mom, I really don't get that. I don't know. I'm still scared to death. I don't know. So am I bad because I haven't conquered fear? See, if they're that open, you can go right on and continue that teaching process and guiding process and helping to ask more questions that make them ponder deeper about it. So that's where you can't assume ever that you know where they are. You have to ask them. You have to ask where their heart is. You have to know. Then what we're going to talk about today is, with that all being said, every one of them is totally different. It just doesn't seem fair that if you have 4, 3, 2, 10 kids, that you never get parenting. Because you think you got it, and then the next child comes and you don't got it. And then the next one comes and throws everything out of whack. So just when we think we're kind of getting the picture, it doesn't work on the next child. So the individuality of both the child, they're all individual, so that's part of it, their individuality. And then there's your individuality, and then there's how those two personalities interact together. And with some of your children, you already know they are a piece of cake. They're compliant, they're wonderful, they just seem to follow the rules there. And then you have others that you butt heads with constantly. And you say, I am training them the same way. We are doing the same thing. We are doing everything the same. How come? And then we erroneously say, well, it's because this child is good, and this child is not so good. And I need to help this one repent and change and be different and discipline them so they can be good. And that's not necessarily the case at all. It means that we're different. And we, as the adults, see, in that scenario, who do we want to change? The child. That child should change. The reality is, if I want to be attached and get into that child's space, I have to change. So it's the adult responsibility to initiate change. It's not fair to ask our children to be more adult than we're willing to be. And yet, that's kind of what we sometimes do. So, with that being said then, the key is, number one, I think, is to understand that they are individual. They came individual. And you cannot and should not make it your goal to make them the same. Unfortunately, that's what we kind of do. We have this image of what a good child looks like. Therefore, I'm going to do all I can in disciplining, in lecturing, in whatever it takes to make you fit into this mold of what I perceive a good child to be. And Heavenly Father didn't intend us to be that way. He intended us to be individuals. And He gave children parents to help children become the best individual they can be. Not to change them into a clone of me. Though that would make parenting easier. But that's not the goal. Now, we look at it and we say, well, I don't do that, I don't do that. I just want you to ponder. Because it's not a conscious, it's a subconscious thing. It's not, I want you to be like me. But as we discipline and we try to change them and we try to work with them, what is the goal? And usually the subconscious goal is to make you think like I do.
I remember when my little girl was young and we were at a restaurant and I was there with my parents and Ava kept trying to go to this table to talk to these people at the table and they were being very friendly, but I kept going, Ava, get back here, Ava, and I kept going, Eric, I can't keep her from going to the table, and I was just getting so embarrassed and so nervous, and these people were very nice, going, hi, and talking to her, but my mom goes, you need to stop doing that to her, because you're embarrassed and uncomfortable. You're trying to hinder her from, being social and gaining confidence in that, and those people were very nice, so she wasn't bothering them, but I just remember my mom saying that, and I love that, because I'm like, I can't put my fears and my insecurities on my children. And she's like, let her go talk to them. They are happy to talk to her. Give her that opportunity to grow in confidence and let her do that, but she goes, don't let your insecurities hinder her. And I've always kind of thought that, you know, as my kids have gotten older, I need to be careful not to let my, you know, my insecurities put that on them and let them grow in those ways. But yeah, I thought that was kind of prevalent to what you were saying.
Yes, it is. Now, with that being said, and this is a given, obviously teach safety and obviously teach, you know, but there are so many things that they are safe and they are okay and they are wonderful. It's just that I'm uncomfortable with it. So it's just a very, so I want you to ponder on that during the week. You know, what do you really, are you really trying, now you will at this moment as you sit here say, no, I am not. I am not trying to make them into me. But when you think about how you discipline, and just like that, I want you to be a little reticent to go talk to strangers. I want you to be safe. I want you to sit here with me. I want you to react the way I do. That was great counsel. What, is it because it's a right or wrong or a safe or an unsafe? Or is it because I just don't feel comfortable with this? So I just sort of think about that during this week as you look and ponder your parenting. So I think that we came to earth with certain things that are, I guess in this life you have to be careful about saying unchangeable, but are pretty much in order. One of them is gender. That was before the pre-existence. That is in the Proclamation on the Family. We were male and female spirits before we came to earth. So with that, with gender, there comes certain preordained responsibilities in this life, that of bearing children, that of having the priesthood. Those responsibilities are also in the Proclamation on the Family, in the Doctrine of the Family. And also with gender and the responsibilities come certain gifts that are given, different gifts to men that they can perform their responsibilities, different gifts to women that they can be successful in performing their responsibilities. The Lord always prepares us and gives us what we need to be successful. So that's one thing that we come to earth with. So right from the get-go, if you've got boys and girls, you'll notice without any training, without any teaching, they're different. They just tend to be different. I was always amazed how my boys were born into this life being able to make gun sounds and car sounds and explosion sounds. They just know how to do that. And my girls, they don't make those noises so well. But boy, they can sure make the noise of a baby crying, oh, it's okay, I'm wrong. So I think that, and that's without ever being taught. I have a daughter who has 6 children, 5 little girls, and then she had a boy. And so this little boy is growing up with the princesses and the dress-ups, and he is boy, boy, boy. He goes straight to the balls, he goes straight to the trucks, and she didn't teach him. You see, there's something that, and I realize that somebody will say, but I know somebody. But this is generically how we come, is we bring that, trailing these clouds of glory, we bring that with us. A second thing that I think we bring with us, and I feel like this is because we listen to Joseph Smith teach about the council in heaven, and we know from the Doctrine and Covenant, from the Pearl of Great Price, that there were great spirits that were there that were foreordained as leaders. Abraham, Joseph being some of them, that if you read more of the modern conference talks, you know that you were foreordained to a mission in this life before you came. Which says to me, before we came to earth, we had a distinct personality, we were making distinct choices to follow or not follow the plan, and that we were engaged at probably different levels of commitment to that plan. So that's how you would have a noble and great spirit. That's one who's anxiously engaged in following the plan. And you might have some fence sitters down here that maybe were struggling a little bit more with the plan. That's why we called it the war in heaven. It was a war of ideology. It was this figuring out where you wanted to be. So we know that we had gender in the pre-existence, and we also know that we had personality, that we had distinct feelings, impressions, and commitments, and levels of testimony for the plan before we came to earth. Those things we brought with us. Those are part of the spiritual nature of who we are when we came to earth. Now, when you're here on earth, you're also greatly influenced by your environment. And that's the family you're born into, that's the economic level that they're in, that's the country you're born into, the nationality you have. It's there's just so many factors. It's birth order. There's so many factors that fall into that. Now you take all of these things and you mush them up together, and that kind of creates who you are and how you react to these things creates who you are. Now, because of the atonement, all of these things can be, we can change. We have the ability to change. So nothing is written in stone that between these things. So as we come unto Christ, the negative influence of any of these can be purified and can become a positive. So no one should ever say, yep, you're right, it's not my fault. I mean, it's just the way it was, and I can't do anything about it. And it's, nope, you're right. I've been born on the other side of the track. I'd be a good person, but I'm not, because we, through the atonement, any of these things can be changed. So, with that being said, and of course, I think we have the responsibility then to apply to the atonement to help if we were raised with a lot of baggage, maybe because of a bad environment in where we were brought up, the atonement can erase that and alleviate that and take that and wash that clean if we do our part to apply to that atonement. So we have that, we know we have that opportunity and that invitation from the Lord to do that. But what I want to talk about today is what you brought with you as your personality. You know, where were you? What is this core personality that you bring with you? And understanding that you bring something, and then understanding that your children are each bringing something, and then understanding that what you are and what you bring with you in that core personality can be glorified through experience or condemned through experience. And our responsibility as parents is to help our children glorify who they already are. How to magnify it, how to expand it, how to make it become wonderful. So, how many of you know about the color code? Let me change the question. How many of you do not know about the color code? 3. Okay, we're gonna really go through it. We're gonna do it really quick because where you already know a little bit about it, I think we can educate, help you understand it without actually going in depth to it. But we'll do a quick review so that we can kind of be on the same page as we talk about this. When I was in college, which won't tell you how many years ago that was, but it was a few. a book came out, which was greatly interesting to me, and it's the book called The Color Code. It is very, very old. It is by Taylor Hartman. You can still get it online. You can get it at the library. But more important, you can get the tests that he writes. And he has tests for individuals. He has tests for marriage. He has tests for teenagers. He has tests for young people. And they're all written, I mean, the reason there's the different tests is they're written in verbiage that those different age kinds of, people can understand, that you can find out. Now, this is not the only personality kind of test that there is out there. Since this, and I'm sure even when this was being written, there are a lot of different tests. And a lot of companies, if you go and apply for a job, will have you take a personality test so that they can kind of understand you better and know. And it's very possible to cheat on these kinds of personality tests and come across as somebody different. Because as we talk about some of the different kinds of personalities, you don't want to look bad, so you may answer what you think is a right answer rather than a real answer, and then you come across as a different person than you really are. So all of these tests, regardless of what you take, are only effective if you're absolutely honest, knowing that there's no right or wrong. This is just a tool for understanding. There is no right or wrong personality. There are different personalities, and every one of them has strengths and weaknesses. That's what's critical to understand with your children. There's no right or wrong personality in a child. There's different personalities in a child. And our responsibility as parents then is to bring out the strengths in our children and try to teach them and train them in how to handle their weaknesses without making them feel like they're a bad person. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And our goal is to overcome our weaknesses without letting them defeat us. So I have found, as I have looked at different personality tests and studied a few of them, by and large, they all kind of fall into the same general patterns. That they group personality types in the same general kinds of ways, but they may have a different title for what they are. Some of them is fire, water, they use the elements, and some of them they just title them differently. And he just happened to title his with colors. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is just the colors. The other thing that I really liked about this particular one, and maybe because it's old, is that it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simplistic kind of a test that helps you understand. And I am simple-minded, so I need things some of these others get a little bit more complicated and, longer tests, and I'm sure that they evaluate more things, but I like simplicity because that's what I understand. So with this being said, we're just going to very quickly, for those of you who don't know, kind of go over the categories, but we're going to go into more in depth in what the child and what the parent, how we can work together, which sometimes when we take the whole test, we don't have time for. So if you're interested, I would highly recommend that if you're not familiar, you've never done it, that you go online, that you can pull up the test, or you go to the library, check out the book, get the test, and take it. If you are extremely brave and have a great deal of self-confidence, then it's fun to have somebody, you take it for each other. And because, generally speaking, we do not see ourselves as others see us. And so if you do that, it has to simply be teaching. if I had Andrea take it from me and I looked at some of her answers and said, that's not right, that's not me, if that's how she perceives me, there's something I can learn from that more than trying to correct her perception. If that is her perception, it is her perception. And then I have to look at myself and say, whoa, is that the way I'm coming across? I didn't know that people saw me that way. I didn't know that.
The last time I took your class was several years ago with my friend Gina, and she said, you're totally a yellow. And I thought, I don't see myself as a yellow at all. She's like, you're so spontaneous and fun. And I thought, really? And I loved it because I actually thought, I do have that side. I kind of like feel like it doesn't fit in my mom mode. So I've kind of ignored that side for several years. But I liked knowing that somebody else that knew me pretty well saw that in me. And my husband's like, yeah, I totally see that in you. And I had kind of lost that side of me. So it was kind of
See,
neat.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, especially because it was positive.
I know.
So much fun.
Well, Gina's always positive, so.
Oh, I think it's wonderful. But you know, when we talk with our children and we think they see everything and understand everything from where we're trying to tell them, but they don't. And bottom line is their truth is their truth. It's not what we think we're telling them. It's what they are taking in and what they're perceiving. And we don't know what that is sometimes unless we ask them. So it's just, you do have to be brave because it's not a matter of argument. It is a matter of education. You do, you know. You're not there to convince them that they're right or wrong in understanding you. Okay, with this being said, I want to give you the 4 categories that we're going to talk about. Remember, nothing is right, nothing is wrong. We just are giving them a title so we can talk about it. That's all. That's all. So, red, and I'm going to give you their need. Red is power. Blue, primary need, intimacy. White is peace. And yellow is fun. Now, none of these are right or wrong. But the reason I say this, their needs, this is where if that kind of a personality feels this, they're at a place of contentment, of peace, of happiness, okay? So, if I have a yellow child, and that yellow child, as you look at this, their need, what they need to feel fulfilled is to feel like life is fun. Then, if I am a wise mother, I will say, how can I make their jobs fun? It's not that they don't get to not do jobs. It's how can I create an environment where their emotional need can be met, but they're still learning that there's things to do. Okay, then I also, as a mother, I may have a blue child. And a blue child wants to be intimate or close, have close relationships. And they tend to then be pleasers because they don't want to disrupt a relationship by not making you happy. So if I have a blue child and I have a job list for that blue child, pretty much I can give the child the list and they'll go do it and they'll come back and it'll be done great and it'll be wonderful and they'll feel good and I'll feel good. If I have a red child who wants power and I want to teach them to do their jobs, they want to be in control of those jobs. They don't want me to tell them what their jobs are. Because once I start telling them what to do, they're going to fight. Because they want to be in charge. They want to be the one that's... And when they lose their power, immature, red children feel like they're losing their identity. So you're telling me what to do because you want me to be just like you, and I don't want to be just like you, therefore I don't want to do what you're going to do. So how do you teach them and train them, helping them feel that they have some power, they have some control, so that they can have some identity, but they still have to be the child and learn certain principles.
From this, in seeing a characteristic in my child, the second you hand them a paper or you ask them what, here's your chores, they fight. So last year I was like, okay, how am I gonna go around this? And it benefited me to the 10th fold, because I said, well, why don't you pick 3 chores today? What do you wanna do? And they picked 3 things that were completely harder than I was gonna give them. But they were willing to do it because that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have never given you that because I knew you would fight with me. But they came up with it, and I'm like, great, sweep and mop the whole kitchen. That's fabulous. So
Yeah.
it benefited me once I gave that to them.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
really-
your reds are real achievers. They are high achievers. And so what I'm saying now is we parent all of them. But how you parent them changes. And we tend to parent all of our children the same way and wonder why it works for some and it doesn't work for some, is because we need to be cognizant of who they are and what they respond to. We also have to be cognizant of who we are. If I am a red parent, then I'm demanding. I want this done, I want it done now, and I don't want any flack, and I'm the boss, and you will do it. And that may not set with some of them. So you have to understand who you are and how that's affecting your parenting. And then all this color code, all of this what we're talking about today is simply to give you ideas, simply to give you understanding. It is not to pigeonhole people. For 1 week, for this week, you have permission to pigeonhole anybody you want. You may look at, as a matter of fact, I want you to think about what your children are. But so often when we pigeonhole them, we put them in a box and won't let them out. Well, you're red and that's how you act, and so we're just going to fight until you leave home, and that's the way it is. And it's not. It's to understand, to create understanding, so we know how to magnify their strengths and teach to their weaknesses. That's the only reason we do this, is so that we can be more effective in helping them grow and not get stuck in who they are. So, let me just, for a minute, give you a quick, if you will, a quick look at what each of these personalities sort of look like, so that you can, as we talk about these, you can get that feeling. I think this is in your syllabus, and it's the strengths and the motivation, the strengths and weaknesses of each personality. So as we talk about it, I'm going to go through these, and then I'm actually going to give you a couple of the test questions, just so you can see how the words line out with these different personalities. And then we'll talk about how to parent to them, what the child's needs are, and then how to parent to them, because I think that's what we really need the most. So let's just start with a blue personality. I don't know what the order of it is in your syllabus, because I don't have that in front of me, but let's just start with a blue personality. If you notice at the top, it says motivation is intimacy. A blue personality wants closeness. Relationships and closeness in relationships is very important to them. If there's a conflict in the relationship, if they feel like you're unhappy with them in the relationship, it frustrates them. It's heartbreaking to them. It causes them anxiety and grief. They feel safe when the relationships are close. Now, a red personality doesn't care. So that's why I want you to see the differences. A red personality is not a people person. And if you're mad at them, great. As long as they get their own way, they don't care. So they just want the power. So these different things make a big difference. You'll look at your blue and see them when they've done something wrong, they just seem to repent really quickly, and they're so sorry and they're so remorseful, and you think, oh, they're so spiritual, they're so wonderful, they're so good. They just want that intimacy back. And you have your red child, and they make a mistake, and they never say they're sorry. You think, they just are the most hard. We're talking personalities here and things that we have to help them develop. So your blue, they want intimacy. Their strengths are they're loyal to your family, they're loyal to relationships, they're very predictable, they're very stable, could I say? And if you look at the weaknesses, blues tend to be a bit boring. They get stuck, they don't like change, they don't like spontaneity, they just want it the status quo because that feels safe for them. They're very family-oriented and group-oriented. Those children are very close to family, like to do things with family, like to be with the family. They're very, very much family-oriented. They're well-organized. They will probably have the clean bedroom. And they get their homework handed in. And they feel responsible for that naturally. So that's good. They create in the environment stability and safety because they like things to be pretty much the same. They keep it the same, and if you're the mother and you're blue, you will create stability and a feeling of safety in your home. There will be, and you radiate that as part of your personality. Blues are slow and careful of change. We're not spontaneous. We don't like change. We'll do it if it has to be. Your blues are also governed by morality. They make choices because they are right. They're governed by a right choice. They're very moral. Now, a blue is a very strong personality. So some people have a hard time figuring out if they're blue or red because they're both strong personalities, but they're strong for different reasons. A blue will fight to the finish over a moral issue because it's right. And we will do what's right because it's the right thing to do. A red will fight because they are right. And so you will do it my way because I am right. A blue will say, no, we'll do it this way because it is right. The precept is right. So those two can be dynamite together. They can just, woohoo, have fireworks. A blue, if you go over to weaknesses, they procrastinate. They're afraid to take risks. They are guilty. Blues backpack guilt. They're perfectionists because they're so moral. They expect perfection of themselves. Some of you beat yourselves up for not being a good enough mother and you're not doing it right. And you may be blue. They're perfectionists but because they beat themselves up and carry a lot of guilt. But by the same token, they also tend to hold their children to a level that may be an unrealistic level of doing things right. And that it may not be realistic at all. But because we got to be celestial, we got to be good, we got to do it right. For ourselves, we also hold that for our children and don't allow growth. We just should be there, we should do it. And that's why sometimes we get overwhelmed when a new program is explained to us. All of a sudden we have to do it right, and there's one more thing, and I just write, and we put it on our plate, and now I'm feeling guilty because I'm not getting it done. And we got to lighten up. We just got to lighten up. So the goal as we study these things is to figure out your weakness and learn. It won't come as natural. You learn to pull in the strengths of the other colors. That's our goal, is to gain the strengths of the other colors. Okay? So in developing this relationship with your children who might be blue, do emphasize their security in the relationship, so you validate them frequently. They need validation. You be sensitive and soft-spoken in your approach. Blues are very self-critical and have self-guilt. So they will self-discipline a lot of times. And if you come across as a red and overpowering and dominant with a heavy lecture, it just destroys them. They say, yep, you're right, I can never be that good. You be sincere and genuine. Blues like a well-mannered, appropriate behavior. They're not much into some of the yellow, flippant, they want things proper and orderly, and they come that way. Some of yours, you have to teach that, but they don't like risks, and they're not very creative, because being creative is risk-taking. And so they tend to be boring, and you have to promote creativity in them. Help them develop their creativity. Allow a lot of time for them to gather their thoughts, think about what they want to say, because they want to be right. They want to appear right. They have a hard time being morally wrong. So they want they're good at primary answers. Give the primary answers, because they want their answer to be right. They want to look right. And so be sure and make it very safe for them to not be perfect. And help them to have plenty of time before they present home evening or whatever, so that they're not spontaneous. They're not just going to come up with great grand ideas. They're good copiers, because they'll see something that's really good and they'll want to copy it, and they want theirs to look good, but they need time to make it look good. So on the don't side, don't make them feel guilty. They will do that all by themselves. Don't be sarcastic or rude with them, because that cuts them to the soul. They don't roll with that well. Don't expect them to be spontaneous. So if you're married, if you're having to be a yellow and you're married to a blue, and you come and say, oh, this is beautiful outside, let's go on a hike. Don't expect that blue to go, oh yay, let's go. What are you talking about? It wasn't on the schedule 2 weeks ago, so I don't know that I can, I've got things on my schedule. I got a plan. I got to do a plan. And so don't expect them. Now, if you're blue, you need to learn to have more of that spontaneity. You need to learn to do more of that. Don't expect them. Blues are prone to depression and discouragement. They're emotional basket cases. They carry emotions with them a lot. And we don't let go of them, because it's coupled with guilt. So if they become depressed, don't expect them to, bring them a Tootsie Roll and they bounce back. It takes them a while to think through and work through emotions, negative emotions and depression. And they need to learn it, but you need to learn how to help them learn it. If that's your children. If it's you, then you need to learn it. Don't expect them to forgive quickly. They backpack. They backpack offenses, and they need to learn to give them up, but their natural tendency is to backpack. So you have to help them learn how to get past that. Okay? Yellows. A yellow personality, if I had a whole conference center of people, your highest number probably would be blues. Of LDS, if we had an LDS group, then the highest numbers would probably be blues. One of your lower numbers are going to be your yellows. And yet they are absolutely indispensable to life. But yellows are the plague of blues and reds. But you gotta have some yellows. Yellow is literally the sunshine. They are what make life worthwhile. Their focus is to have fun, and they are happy, and I have positive personalities. They're like butterflies. They just flit around life and are totally not focused. Their strengths they are absolutely people-oriented. If you have a yellow walk into this room right now, they will make an entrance. They will come in with noise and with joy, and it will be wonderful, but you will know they've entered the room. Because one of the words that frequently describes the yellow on the test is obnoxious. And they're just kind of loud and in your face, and they're, happy, but they're always right there. They're there. They're open. They'll tell you anything, good, bad, or ugly. They just don't care. They're just all about people, and they lay everything right out in the open. They're not trying to hide anything. It's just out there. They are disorganized. They cannot keep track of anything. They're Leverites. They just piles of stuff, and it's just not important to them to put things away because it doesn't matter. It's just there. And I have one of these, and I have one of these, and I have more piles of stuff, and it's okay. They need to have a place where they can have piles of stuff. They also need to learn to create order, but they also need to have a place that can be disordered, because that's part of who they are. Now, with that being said, that's not just in stuff. That's in life. They're kind of disordered. They just kind of ping pong around. They have a hard time staying focused. Your yellow is the child. You'll say, okay, it's time to go get undressed. Let's go get ready for bed. And they'll say, okay. And then they'll go, and then they'll stop and get a drink, and then they'll go pet the cat, and then they'll stop and play cars. And in 15 minutes, when everybody else is coming back down, you'll say, you don't have your jammies on yet. Can you get your jammies on? Oh, yeah. They won't fight with you. They don't argue with you. But they're not driven. And so if you happen to be the driven adult and you have this child will drive you insane. Everyone else will get their jobs done in 20 minutes, and 2 hours later, this one hasn't got their jobs done. So it takes different kind of parenting. So if you have a young child, you may have to work with them doing jobs longer than a blue child, not because they don't know how to do it. It's because they're learning to stay focused, not necessarily learning how to make a bed. They may know the steps in making a bed, but they're learning the self-discipline of staying focused. So your parenting continues, and you have to be able to stick in that parenting, not in anger, but in understanding that this child just needs more training in this area. It is extremely hard for a yellow to learn self-discipline. Yellows are fabulous starters and lousy finishers. They are optimistic. I tell my husband that I married a man with pink glasses on and he's never taken them off. And everything in his world is good. Everything is good. And I'm blue, so I'm very practical and very realistic. And I'll say, now, come on, let's just talk about this. It'll be fine. It's all going to be fine. It's all gonna be, no, I mean, I'm serious. Let's talk about it. Let's make a plan. Let's do this. Oh, come on, Carlene. It's all fine. It's fine. It's all good. It's all good. His favorite statement. It's all good. It's all good. So you just have to understand, he's not wrong and I'm not right. We're different. We're just different. Weaknesses for these yellows, they have trouble being focused. They talk about themselves a lot, and they talk a lot. They just plain talk a lot, and a lot of that talk is about themselves. They like self-attention. They like to be the center of stage. They like to be the entertainer. It's the clown in the groove. They need a lot of attention on them. So in developing that relationship with them, be positive, adore them. Yellows are very touchy-feely. They're very physical. These are your most physical kinds of personalities. Accept their teasing without getting angry. If you're a red or a blue, you get mad. Come on, settle down. Let's get this done. And learn to have some humor and come back with it and be happy with them. But you still do have to help them learn to be focused. Remember that they hold feelings deeply. Now, they seem to be just so pleasant and happy all the time, but because they are so people focused, if you insult them or hurt them, it goes deep. It may not show on the surface, but it is very, very painful for them. Enjoy their charisma and their innocence, and allow them, a yellow, you really have to allow them time to talk. They need time, and it'll feel like they're talking all the time. But they do need time to be listened to be played with. You need to wrestle with, you need to touch, you need to be physically involved. Yellows like to wrestle. Don't wrestle a white, but yellows, they want to wrestle. So you're going to find, do you see how you're going to connect differently with them? So don't be too intense. Don't, they need to be, have you be light with them. Don't ignore them. Don't put them in timeout forever and forget them. That's excruciatingly painful. I like this, don't classify them as just butterflies, because they have a lot of depth and they have a lot of meaning. And though their life appears flighty, they really have a lot of deep focus in them that you need to help them develop. Then the other thing is, and this is hard for some parents, don't totally control a yellow's schedule. They need time for fun. They need time to play. Just as a white needs time by themselves, yellows need time to just have imagination and to have fun and to play and to be happy. And when we control them too tight, then it's very, very confining for them. So they need that opportunity. Okay, let's look at the white personality. Yellows and whites are both gentle personalities. They're a softer personality. Your reds and blues are going to be what you probably might look at in your home as strong-willed, more strong-willed, where your white and your yellow are your softer personalities, but just because they don't appear defiant doesn't mean they don't need very gentle care. They need some very, very gentle care. So your white personality is probably one of the easiest to raise, but 10 or 1 and 1, this is not the book, this is me, I think is one of the ones that's easiest to destroy, to break the spirit of a white child. And so I think that though they appear to be easy to raise, I think you have to be very cognizant of how your interaction with them is affecting them. If it's building them and helping them grow, or if it's just making them quit. Because whites tend to be quick quitters. And so if you discourage them too much, too heavily, too harshly, they tend to quit. So your white is a gentle personality. They're ones that typically you would call maybe shy. They're not real socially. They're the ones who like to hang back. It's not that they're antisocial. They enjoy being with people, but they just don't want to be in the masses. They enjoy people one-on-one more than they enjoy the big groups of people. They are very amazing watchers. They watch people. They are fabulous listeners. Whites are very caring about how other people feel and how other people are doing things. They're good listeners. They are very motivated to be accurate because they do not ever want to be called up in front of a class. They don't want to be called up in front of the family. They do not like to be called out. They don't like to be the center of attention. Do not give a surprise birthday party to a white child and expect they're going to be happy. But a yellow will love it till they die. But a white child, they do not want to be the center of attention. So in your desire to make something wonderful for them, you could actually put them in a really hard situation without understanding it. A white is a questioner. They ask a lot of questions because they want to be sure they have everything right. They want to be sure they've seen it right, doing it right, acting right. They don't want to be called out because they didn't understand or didn't do something right. They tend to be overly sensitive. They take offense where perhaps none is intended because they're so afraid of being criticized, and they want to do it right. So they tend to be overly sensitive to correction. They're not trusting of their own judgment. They have a harder time making decisions and making judgments because they don't want to be wrong. They tend to, if you look down at their, it's not on here, but they tend to quit. If they don't get something quickly and fast, for example, you're teaching a child to tie a shoe, and he's a white child, and if he doesn't pick it up right away, I can't. They're more prone to use the I can't do that. They do not want to get involved in spontaneous new experiences. That's frightening, that's scary, that's uncomfortable for them. And so if you had a white child and you took them to kindergarten and the teacher says, this child just doesn't really want to get involved in the games, it could be very much that he wants to watch the other children play the games a time or two and see what it looks like and see what's expected and know that he can do it before he wants to engage. Does that make sense? So you have to both help build up their confidence by trying new things without defeating them by pushing them too hard too fast, where they become fearful. They're not good dynamic leaders. They're fabulous Indians. They don't make great chiefs. They would rather be on the team, not lead the team. So they want you to be simple and open. And blues, one of your downfalls as a parent is you talk too much, you lecture too much, because we're moral. We think if they understand the moral issue here, that they'll comply. We just got to get them to understand it. And that's not really right at all. So we talk too much. And a white particularly don't talk too much to them because they just feel like you're attacking. And so kind of be gentle and be very kind. The key word for working with a white is kindness. Be very, very kind and gentle. Doesn't mean you cannot be firm. You need to be firm. But that firmness needs to be cloaked in kindness and gentleness. Okay? And then we have the reds. And the red is definitely what you would call your strong-willed personality. But I want you to look at yourself and see if you are red. And perhaps your spouse. For 1 week, you can look at your spouse and decide what they are. Reds are governed by control. They want to be they are the fabulous leaders. They are fabulous leaders because they love being the boss. And they love telling other people what to do. And a red already knows that they're right. So they feel really good about telling you what to do because their right is right. And they don't have to put up with your not knowing. They'll just tell you what to do. They have very high egos. We look at them and say they are a little bit cocky because they have so much self-confidence in their right. Now, that doesn't really mean their right is right. It means they think their right is right. And so they work quickly, they work independently, you give a red a job list, and they will go and they'll get it done, and they'll be done, and they'll come back and they're finished. They like change, they're very competitive, they want to win because they want to be best. And they want direct answers. They do not care about emotionalism. They do not care about hearing all the stories about why moral issues are moral. Just bottom line it. What do you want me to do? I will go do what you want me to do, but I don't want to hear all the foo of, If you want me to do the dishes, say, would you go do the dishes? I don't want to hear why your day started out bad in taking this child to the store and how you got a flat tire and how I don't care about all the emotionalism of it. Just say, will you do the dishes? And I will go do the dishes. So it's not that they're not willing, is that sometimes the way we present, because of our personalities, we've worn them out before we ever get to the dishes. And so by the time we get to the dishes, it's like, no, I won't. Or you'll get some flack. So they tend to be impatient. They fear being taken advantage of. They think that if you tell them what to do, that you're taking advantage of them. And so they are very protective of their independence. And they're very protective of their identity. They don't want to feel like you're making them be you. They want to feel independent, that they are an independent. Reds tend to move fast. They tend to be high energy. They tend to be get a lot done, accomplish a great deal. But a red will walk over people to accomplish an objective. So people are not as important to a red as the product, the process, getting something done, being able to get something finished. So where you're teaching a red to be sensitive to people, you're teaching a yellow to be more focused on work. And neither is right or wrong. It's just what they are naturally, innately bringing to the table, and then what you need to help them discover. If you tell a yellow to make their own job list, they're kind of at a loss. They're pinging all over the place. They don't know how to do that. And so for them, it's better to say, here's a job list, and I need you to have it done in this amount of time, where you set some external guidelines for them. And a red, you can say, what jobs would you like to do? You make the list and post your list on the fridge, and when you're done, come tell me, and I'll just check and be sure that they're done. And they'll go and they'll do it, and they'll be fine. So they need different kinds of guidance. They need to be guided differently. And so that's the key, is to allow them to all be different. Now, with all of that being said, and I think you're kind of understanding them, then you have to throw into the pot, who are you? Because we are going to tend to parent according to who we are. Let me share with you an experience that I've just had this week. That it was just, and because I was thinking about this class, it was such a fun aha moment for me. Because we think we know, we think we're doing, and then we have another jolt, that just makes us go, whoa. And so my daughter's living with us while they're in transition, selling a house in San Diego, moving up here, and in this whole process, they're living with us, and it is delightful. I love every minute of it. I never want her to move out. I mean, I really would like her to have her own life because she wants it, but not because I want her to have it. And I'm ready to pull her back. It's just so fun to have her as a wonderful, responsible adult where I don't have to parent her. I can just love her and enjoy her, and it's exciting. Anyway, last Saturday, I have a son that lives out in Cuna, and he's just bought some property, and he's actually going to build a soda shop on it. And so he's starting a business. He's kind of an entrepreneur, and the first thing that he has to do is clear this piece of property. And so they're kind of cleaning it up, getting ready for demolition to take out some old buildings on it so he can build this soda shop. So he contacted all of us here in the area and said to the grandkids, he said, okay, I'm willing to hire Saturday afternoon anybody who wants to come over and help clean up this property. So Jana took her 3 children, and they went out, and some of my other kids and their kids went out. This property was awful. I mean, it was worse than, there were decomposing cats on it. Feral cats had been living there, and I mean, it was just, ugh. I was really happy I didn't go. I didn't want to have that work opportunity. But, so they had all been out there, and they had worked all day, and they had really, I mean, Jana had been right out there working with them. And they had all worked hard in this gross, awful, making piles, wood piles and metal piles and all this stuff. And now this week he's going to have somebody come in and demolition and haul it all off. So they worked very hard. Okay, that's hard physical work, okay? They worked hard all day. And to me, I'm blue, moral, right, good thing to do, teach them how to work, do the right thing, get out there, work hard, this is good stuff. I was so proud of her. She was out there working with them. Great. They got home about 9 o'clock. And she has a 15-year-old daughter. Absolutely darling girl. Yellow as they come. Just delightful. Delightful. And see, I can sit back and enjoy all of them because I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do it. So I went to bed about 9:30 or whatever. And the next morning, we got up and she says, Mom, do you know what happened last night? And I said, no. What happened? She said, Eleanor came down at 9:30. Now, remember, they just worked all day. And she said, Eleanor said to her mom, she says, I want to do a midnight hike up to Table Rock. Table Rock is in my backyard. It's just right by my house. But we're talking a nice 2-hour hike in the middle of the night, in the dark, with the coyotes. And when Jana said that to me, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. Going to go out after you've worked all day, and you're exhausted, and she says, and so we went up to Table Rock. Okay, there's the difference in personalities. I would have said, no, we've worked all day, we've had a hard day, you need to get a good night's sleep because you'll get sick. We're not going to now be out all night in cold weather. She and Eleanor hiked Table Rock. What do you think that did for their bonding? Oh, my word. They shivered over the coyote toweling, together. They laughed together. They had fun together. They slid in the mud together. They came home and the next day could hardly move from having hiked the mountain and working all day. Their bodies are so sore. So now they're moaning together. Do you see what happens when we parent to the needs of the child? It is wonderful. Now, we don't do it all the time. But we need to understand ourselves well enough to be able to step out of and meet the needs. And it's not wrong. It's not wrong. See, in my days of raising my children, if one of them would have come up and said that to me, I'm so moral. What do you mean? No, we don't go out after dark. We don't go out at night. And no, you're not going to be out there. I'll give you all the moral lectures. And you're a girl. And blah, blah, blah. That's not right. It's not right. She was absolutely safe. She was with her mom. They had flashlights. They were fine. Do you see where we get stuck? We get stuck in who we are and then how we parent. So the key is to this week, your homework, I want you, number one, I want you to go over the syllabus, parenting styles. So I want you to look, probably you know what you are. If you don't, go online, take the test, and figure out what you are. Then I want you to read to the parenting styles and look at and see if you don't agree. You could disagree too. But see if you do agree with that may be kind of what you do. See if that's where you are. Then I want you, whether it's in your notebook, whether it's in a Ponder Pad, whether you just get a little 50-cent little flip notebook, I just want it to be something that's has its own identity. That it's not going to get lost in some other notebook that you're, so that you know where it is, so you can have access to it. I want you to label a sheet per child. Whether they're married, whether they left home, whether they are home, whether, I don't care. I want you to have a page for each child and one for your spouse. And then I want you to dedicate a day to each page. So day 1, maybe to child 1, or grandchild 1, or how, so that for one day you are focused on one child. During that day, I want you to pray specifically for that child. And in the prayer, I want this to be a discussion with Heavenly Father, not a 2-minute pause on the way to the day or at the end of the day. I would like you to do it at the beginning of the day. And it can be a conversation with Heavenly Father as you're doing dishes. I don't care. But I want it to be a conversation where you seek enlightenment to understand who that spirit is. So part of it is to understand that child's strengths. Part of it is to understand their frustrations, their weaknesses that are innately part of their personality, and how you can best influence them for good. And I want you to have that in your heart and on your mind all that day. All that day. Now, it may be that at the end of the day, you don't feel like you're there yet with that child. So if you need to keep that conversation open with the Lord for another day about that child, do it. This is not a final that you have X amount of hours to get her done. This is do it till you feel comfortable that, not that you have total understanding, I don't think you'll get that in a week, but that I do feel like if you do it with real intent, you'll have insight. Because heaven loves these children more than we do. So I do feel like you'll get insight. So if you feel like you've had some insight on that one, then move to the next one. And then move to the next one. And be sure that one of those days is your spouse. That doesn't include, is your spouse. Okay? So the homework assignment then for the week really is to stop and look at each individual as an individual. Very, very individual. And for you to not go into it with preconceived ideas of who that individual is. But you're leaving yourself open to being taught who that individual is through the medium of the Holy Ghost. Then when you feel like you have finished with that person, whether it's a day or 2 days or whatever, when you've finished with that person, this assignment may take more than a week, depending on how many kids you have and how long you're going to spend. But when you feel like you've received insight to that person, then in the evening or in the afternoon or some moment that you figure out which is the good time, find a moment, I want you to express to that child your love for them. This can be a profound experience, but it's not easy. This is not an easy one. It will require spiritual energy, emotional energy, commitment, and focus. And for some of our personalities, that's hard to come by. And for some others, for example, if you happen to be a red, you'll take the assignment and say, okay, I'm going to do that. You know, all right. And then you just check it off, check it off, check it off. Okay, I did it. No, that one's done. Okay, next one. But it's more than that. It's getting, for a red, it's getting emotionally into the space. For a yellow, it's trying to stay focused long enough you can actually stay on one child for a period of time until you receive some answers. For a white, it's getting into them enough that you don't feel threatened by their goodness or their whatever, that you don't feel like, you know, that you want to quit because you can't. This is too hard. I can't do this right, so I just quit. Do you see how it affects who you are? I mean, how you even receive this invitation is received by who you are, what you are. So I want you to have the experience, because as you realize that you're affected by who you are and how you receive the invitation, you'll begin to understand how they're all so different. They're all so different. And how we can be led and guided and directed to reach their hearts, their different hearts. It's not impossible. We just have to open up to say, okay, so what do I do with this one or this one or this one? Rather than saying, how come this isn't working? Because it's right. My right is right. Do you see? It just can be such a profound, wonderful, growing experience, but it's hard. Most really, really good experiences are hard. And they take sacrifice, and they take commitment, and they take doing. Yes?
You didn't mention how this is going to hit you if you're a blue.
How you're going to hit you if you're a blue? You're overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed. You know, you feel like, because you want to do everything so right. You want it to be so right. You're so committed to being responsible and doing it right that then I can't. And then the guilt comes. Then we say, okay, let's put the backpack on with the guilt, and we carry the guilt. So it's really, if I could do anything, you know, if I was Aladdin and could do anything I wanted, I would take all of you out of who you are and have you be this third person right out here and have you do it. So that you weren't affected by who you are, but you could learn about who they are, and it would just be this wonderful experience. But we can't do that. But I hope that if you can get a vision, and maybe what you need to do before you even start is pray for a vision to know how to do it with who you are, so it can be successful. But this is probably the hardest homework I've given you, invited you to do. But I promise you, if you do it with real intent, this will have more impact on you than anything else we do all semester. Yeah.
What if you feel like you have one that doesn't fit any of the molds?
Isn't that awesome?
You don't know.
That's right. That's why this experience, by next week, if you start with that one, and you may not get past that one all week, but if you do it, then you will know. Because the Spirit teaches you what a textbook can't teach you. And the Lord wants you to know. So you can know their strengths, their weaknesses, everything at the end of the week. It's true. Because the Spirit knows. The Holy Ghost knows these precious, precious children. So, yeah, yours then becomes even more interesting, challenging. Now, with that being said, she made a really good point. Because did you hear what she said? She said, what if you don't know? If you think you know, you already are going in with preconceived ideas, and you're not as open to the Spirit teaching you as she will be, because she's going in saying, I don't know. So you have to be careful, even how you approach, that you pray That's why I said it'd be so good if you could get out of you. And preconceived notions and preconceived ideas. This is to help understanding, but it's not concrete. Julia.
Yeah, that's the question I had. Can it be that at different stages and different times that we fit different colors? And so you would work differently with them at different times and stages, or do you
The
pretty
goal,
much peg it this
the
way?
goal is to become a rainbow. The goal is as we pass through life, we are who we are, but we learn to pull in and develop with intent the strengths of all the other colors. The strengths of our own color comes naturally. And we don't really have to put forth a lot of effort to develop it. A yellow does not have to develop learning how to be fun. They are fun. I have to learn how to lighten up and get off the schedule and be spontaneous. And know that it's not only okay, it's healthy for my yellow children. But I have to learn that. That's harder for me. So, yes, we want to change. We want to change. We want to pull in. But those that are part of our nature will become easy. They come easy. And the others we have to learn with intent.
Because couldn't things like mental illness or anything like that, or even trauma in a family change?
Absolutely.
Relay in these things.
Absolutely.
So you need it all by the Spirit, of course.
Absolutely. And that's why the Spirit is the great teacher, not the textbook. The Spirit is the great teacher. And when you talk about mental illness, and you talk about ADHD or some of these things, you also have to, that becomes a factor. So then within who they are, including that mental limitation, their ability is not going to be the same as someone who did not have that limitation. So even though you're applying all the right principles and doing all the right things, it's still who they are and what they brought with them. You know, if you've got someone who had polio as a child and is handicapped and has a physical disability, they're never going to stand up and run a quick marathon because it's not, but within their capacity, they can be wonderful. They can grow, they can excel, they can do so much. So be careful that we also look at what their capabilities are without allowing some weaknesses to be excuses. And that's where the Spirit teaches you. The Spirit teaches you where's that balance? Where is that? And we have to work within that. But the Lord teaches us that. Okay? Your homework assignment as far as a conference talk goes, after I've given you this heavy assignment, you're going to go, ah! I want you to read Sister Craig's talk, November 18th, conference, Divine Discontent. Such a good one. And not that I want it, Blues, to make you feel guilty. It's that I want you to understand that the desire to push forward a little bit is divine growth. It's a good thing. It shouldn't be a guilty thing. It shouldn't be a burden. It's a wonderful little push of the Spirit to say, let's just take one more step. Just one more step. You don't have to be perfect. Let's just move one more step. And so I invite you that as you seek to even try to do some of this homework this week, that it will be taking one more step to understanding and learning how to touch the heart of your little ones. Whether they be married and gone, whether they still be in your home, our families don't end. So if our children aren't there, it's reaching out to grandchildren or nieces or nephews. The family is eternal. And to understand and to teach and to help and to be an example is eternal. And we will never be released from that opportunity to minister. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.